It's on. Cool. So tonight we're going to do things a little bit different at youth group. We're going to have a panel discussion, and it's going to be on friendship and what friendship should look like for you guys in middle school and high school. And I think this is probably a really important conversation we need to have, because in the Christian life, you need to have friends. That no one is called to do the Christian life by themselves. So you need friends to help you in your faith. And evangelism, when it comes to sharing the gospel, a lot of you guys are going to share the gospel through friendships. So how to make friendships with lost people so you can share Jesus with them. So right now we're going to ask our panel to come on down and give them a hand. Yes. Okay. So entire piece of the back of my head. Let's give a hand for the mics. Everyone has a mic. That is cool.
Hey. Swag master.
So does anyone... Okay, let's cheer for Swag Master.
You want to sit here by your wife?
Okay, so before we start, does anyone want to hear me break out a song? No.
Absolutely yes.
Any requests? Drum roll. Do you want to build us? No. How does it go? I forgot it. Anyway, so I guess we'll just start with the panel. So, you guys know that song. Good stuff. So, before we get started, we're going to have our panel introduce themselves, because some of you guys might know some of them. Others of you might not know them that well. So, we're going to let our panel introduce, starting with
Chris Brooks. Swag master. Tinkerbell.
Kaylee Malott.
Laura Ritchie.
Rachel Collier.
David Durr. Yeah. Ryan Ritchie. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to start with our first question of the night. So we want you to describe what your middle school and high school friendships look like, and how are they the same and how are they a little bit different? And let's start with Chris.
What? Yeah, I do. So, middle school, I was in private school for all of up until the end of middle school, so my relationships there were pretty fake. I spent a lot of time trying to impress people. Same with high school, although it was less effective in high school. It was, school in general was a struggle for me.
So in middle school, I was definitely searching for a friend group, and I ended up trying to be friends with a lot of the popular girls, and it did not go so well, and I was bullied a lot. And it wasn't until like 8th grade until I found my core friends, and they were the same friends I had in high school as well. So the difference was definitely I was searching for friends, and then I had my friends.
So I went to Spring Cove Middle School and then Central High School, and we had teams when we were in middle school. I don't know if they still do that. But really my friends in middle school were the people who were on my team. Like, I didn't really choose them. They were just the people who were in my class. And then high school, I chose my friends more, and I was kind of a floater. Until my senior year, I didn't have really one friend group, and so that I had friend groups that I wanted to be a part of, but I wasn't always part of that one, and so I ended up feeling left out a lot. It was probably my own fault, but I felt left out a lot until probably my senior year when I had a solid friend group from church.
I would say middle school was a searching. It was activities, seeing who was involved in what. Because when I went to middle school, that was when Roaring Spring and East Freedom and Martinsburg all came together, was in middle school. So I didn't know a lot of people. It was almost like starting a new school. So it was meeting a lot of new people, figuring out who people were. And then in high school, I would say I had a core group of friends that I then pushed away for another group of friends. So I think in high school it was more opportunistic type friendships, the ones that were allowed to do the things I was allowed to do, and not the ones who held me accountable for the things I shouldn't be doing. So.
When I went to middle school, I switched from one school district to another, and in high school back to that other school district. So it was, in middle school was meeting new people, and it was a different type of atmosphere. And then going back to high school, trying to reconnect with old friends from elementary school, and everyone had changed in a different manner. So the hardest challenge that I ran into was just trying to meet new people. I wasn't very social, I wasn't very outgoing. So just trying to meet people was where I struggled.
I also hail from Spring Cove Middle School and Central High School, represent. Yeah, middle school for me, you definitely, I saw cliques forming, so I had certain friends that I spent more time with, but my experience at least was that I was kind of friends with everyone, at least to some extent in middle school. High school was totally different. High school, people really started to group each other off into totally different groups, and I still tried to be friendly with everyone, but I found that some people didn't care. So definitely had a more concentrated group of friends once I got to high school.
All right, so this is kind of whoever wants to answer, feel free. Why did you choose those friends or group in school?
Yeah, I think for me it was me trying to always be somebody I wasn't and hang out with people that I probably really shouldn't have been hanging out with. So it was searching for acceptance, and not necessarily the popular group, because I was definitely not a part of that. But searching for acceptance, not understanding who I was, I had no clue. And because of that, it was bad decision after bad decision after bad decision. And a lot of that was followed, what was led to by the people I attempted to hang out with.
I would say that I had relatively good friends until my senior year when we had a lot of trouble with my home life. And then I did not want the good friends because I did not want them calling me out on what I was doing wrong. So I hung out with a not so good group of friends, and I became the one that your parents would probably warn you about. And so I would say sometimes home life struggles will dictate how some of the kids act in school and how you view them as well. So I think in that respect too, just because you guys all know Christ, to be mindful to love people even when they seem out of sorts, just don't get sucked into their out of sorts.
You guys, anyone on that side? Go ahead.
So like I said, I felt really left out until my senior year. So the groups that I wanted to be a part of, they were the more cool girls, not necessarily the most popular, like the stereotypical. I guess back then the cheerleaders were super popular. It wasn't necessarily them, the people who were partying all the time, but it was other girls that were very popular that I wanted to hang out with. And until I realized that I just need to be myself, and that's more important, then that's when I finally found a friend group that I fit in. And some of those girls were part of that friend group, but it wasn't intentional.
I think for me, it was my friend group, at least at school, was kind of dictated by, I played basketball, so I was friends with a lot of the guys that played basketball. But kind of as high school went on and majority of the kids in high school started making stupid decisions, I had to make an intentional decision to stick with my church friends. And I went to church in a different school district, so it was a little bit easier for me to separate because it was just kind of totally two distinct groups. But I chose those friends, and most of them lived in Williamsburg and around there, because they were making good decisions and they gave me good advice. Kind of like how Rachel was talking about running from those type of friends, at least in my experience, God woke me up to realize I needed to run towards those kinds of friends.
So I discovered something recently. It's called Instagram.
I taught him how to use the selfie mode. So sorry
appreciate
about that, guys.
So much.
My
Thank
bad.
you. That is great. I'm gonna give a shout out right now to Caleb Barnett. On his Instagram, he says, "You don't make friends; your friends make you." I think that's a really cool thing. So let me put this question out here. How did your group of friends influence your decisions? How did they influence your social time?
Hey guys, are we interrupting something back there? Or? Okay, a lot of chatter. Sorry about that. Continue.
So how did your group of friends influence you?
For me, I became more outgoing and more talkative. But then I started hanging out when I got to high school with the wrong group of kids. We'd go to the mall and steal stuff from the stores. It was more of a game to see how much we could actually steal. You could rent lockers at the mall at that point, and we were just stuffing lockers with stuff that we stole. And then we got busted, and that was bad. So that experience really changed the people that I hung out with. I really didn't know that I was with the wrong crowd, that we were doing something that wasn't right. I didn't come to Christ fully until later in life. So we thought it was just fun. We didn't see any harm in it. And that's how my friends directed my social life.
So a lot of my friendships in high school, they were the friends, their relationships with Christ were very surface level. So like they didn't really have very deep relationships with Christ. And so the social times were good, clean, fun, but I found that the relationships with them didn't really further my own relationship with Christ, which just like solidifies how important it is to have good Christian friends.
Anyone else?
Yeah, so I mentioned before that I spent a lot of time trying to be somebody I wasn't, mainly because I didn't know who I was. And so, you know, the people I tried to hang out with, or I hung out with, I had a couple of decent friends later in high school. But when you're trying to be a part of something that's not you, you do things that's not what you would normally do, and you make bad decisions, and you know, like Dave says, you do some really stupid things, so it necessarily wasn't how they intentionally influenced me. It was what I was willing to do. How far was I willing to go to try to get their attention? How far was I willing to go to be able to hang out with them to you know, we didn't text in 1985, but
I was born the year after that.
yeah, I graduated high school in '88, so
Big year for both of us.
yeah. So, and in any case, you know, you always wanted to be with that group of people that you thought, you know, you looked up to, and for some odd reason, I looked up to some really bad examples. But you know, I would imagine today that you want to be a part of that text group, or you want to be, I have no idea how to relate it to today, but I put a lot of effort into trying to hang out with people that I thought I wanted to hang out with, and they ended up being bad influences on my life, and I made a lot of bad decisions because of it.
All right, so this is what you guys are saying is really kind of interesting. You know, how some of your friends influenced you in good ways, some of them influenced you in bad ways, and it was what you were willing to do to be accepted by that peer group. And maybe this next question is where some of you guys are living right now, that you're in a really tough situation. Have you ever had to end a friendship or seek out a new one? And if you had to end that friendship, how did that go about?
I graduated. I literally graduated and never spoke to. I have one friend from high school, but she was the only one that continually made me accountable, that continually told me what I was doing wrong, that continually followed me around, and until this day, continually keeps me accountable and has my back. And we don't talk for months, but when I graduated high school, I did not talk to a single person.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, Dave. For me, it was joining the Navy. That was my out. I was like, I don't know if you've ever heard the term before, but you have a moment of clarity or a clear thought. You open your eyes and you're like, oh, this isn't good. I need to go. That was the Navy for me, and that's when I met a whole lot of really good guys, and developed a really good core group of friends that I still talk to now. I don't talk to anybody I went to school with. Yeah, no, I don't talk to anybody I went to school with. But there's 5 guys that I was in the service with that I could call today and they would be here tomorrow. And, you know, that sentiment is shared with them too. So, yeah, it was graduation, Navy.
Now, for me, I carried some friends over from middle school to high school, and then we hung out as a group outside of school. And there was one buddy of mine, him and I were really close, and he got himself into some really bad trouble and wrapped me up into it. I wasn't in any trouble, but he was. And I had to choose to just distance myself from him. I haven't talked to him since that night, or another friend of his that he brought into the social circle. And then moving here, I've only lived here for 4 years, and going back to school and getting a full-time job, I've always seeked out new people to communicate with and to hang out with. I keep my social circle extremely small. I have a lot of acquaintances, but I wouldn't say I have very many friends. It's hard for me to trust people sometimes due to some of the situations I've been in my past.
I kind of mentioned it earlier, but for me, I didn't have to end any friendships like totally, but the friends that invited me over for the weekend in middle school became, at least a lot of them became the same friends that were partying every weekend. So just kind of got to the point where they just knew, don't invite me on the weekend because I'm not coming. So probably from my sophomore year up, I don't know if any of my school friends invited me to do anything on the weekend. But like I said, I surrounded myself with some good people that I was able to do stuff with.
So let me put this. Oh, sure, go for it.
So this is kind of so this is different from someone having to end a bad relationship, a bad friendship. But I want to talk to some of you who have lost friends, like who have lost friendships. Maybe it wasn't necessary, but it happened. When I was in 7th grade, my best friend at the time, we were just walking through the hall, just told me out of the blue that we couldn't be friends anymore. And it like really hurt. And I think that's part of the reason that until my senior year, I had a lot of insecurity and I felt really left out from things. And not that I wanted to be her best friend anymore, but I felt like if one person doesn't want to be my friend, maybe no one wants to be my friend. So I just want those of you who might feel that way also to know that you're not alone, because there were probably a lot of other girls around me that were feeling the same way. And if I would have looked out for them instead of just pitying myself, I could have had other friends too.
So are any of you friends with people from high school or middle school today? One?
I'm actually still friends with 2 people I went to preschool with, which is it's kind of crazy, but yeah, we still talk on a regular basis.
So something I want to share with you guys. I was reading this one book. There was this guy who had this friend, and his friend died, and his heart was completely broken by that. And then he was praying to God about this, and he said, God, why did I love someone so much who was bound to leave me and not love you that way? So that whole idea is that Jesus needs to be your best friend, And I had this one pastor, he, at youth group, he had all these kids like sit around this table. And then he said, okay, you have friends in middle school, then they leave. And he had those kids sit down. He said, you have friends in high school, they leave. And then he had those people sit down. You have friends in college you make. And then, things happen, you lose distance, and they sat down. And eventually it was just this one guy and a Bible. And he says, Jesus is the one friend that will never leave you. That doesn't mean you don't have other friends, but the most important relationship you need to have is with Jesus, and all your other relationships flow from that. So just be mindful of that. So
I will say, my senior year, the group of friends I had was from this church, from the youth group, and a lot of them we don't like call each other all the time, but if we see each other, we can talk well because we have the same interests. And the one friend that I have from school that wasn't in the youth group when we were a senior now goes to our church. So that's part of the reason why we're still friends.
all right. So I think this is a really good question. Since the students in this room have been exposed to who Jesus is and how he loves, how would you explain what being a good friend looks like?
Say that in high school, just the superficial friendships that I had, and the way people would just turn their back on you, or they would gang up on you, or they would bully you, or they would, I kind of went through it all, and I'm kind of okay to stand alone sometimes too. I did get to a point where I just had enough of everyone's drama, and I just wanted out, so that's why I found my bad group of friends because they were just easier at the time. But I think as I got out of high school, I want to say this to all of you. You are demographically set with your friends right now. You are set with your friends because of your age, because of your address. And this is the time you're selected to be with these people, and these people won't always be around. So when you become an adult, you have the luxury of choosing friends based on many other reasons. And I would say now as an adult, I look for friends that keep me accountable, friends that are loyal, friends that say they're going to do things and they hold to that, friends that aren't afraid to challenge the way I'm feeling or challenge my thoughts. And I would say a lot of that comes from my walk with Christ. And so I don't like to keep friends close to me that hinder my walk. So when I have a friend that constantly challenges my walk or makes me feel a certain way, as an adult, I have the luxury to say, well, I'm just not going to call you anymore. I'm not forced to be with them in school anymore. So it's not always nice to end friendships even as an adult, but I would say that my walk with Christ has become most important, and if my friends don't support that walk, they don't tend to stay a friend. And that may be something that you feel also in school. So if you're walking and your walk is strong with Christ and you keep looking up and friends are disappearing, that's probably because they're walking off the path and you're still walking on it. So don't be afraid to lose friends as you're walking with Christ.
I'd say the way to be a good friend is show Jesus' love to others. It sounds like kind of a broad concept. I was just thinking now, you hear the golden rule, treat others the way you want to be treated. I think that's all right, but that's probably not always right on point. Treat people well is what I would say. The way I want to be treated, I can handle sarcasm. I can kind of handle, bantering back and forth. Not everybody can handle that. So treat people well, not just how you think you should be treated, if that makes sense.
I think one of the important things about, we talked about friends that can hold you accountable and support your Christian walk. One of the things that I've discovered in my walk with Christ is humility. I don't know it all. Nobody does. And so I think when you are, and this is a little bit more on the subject of accountability and having a close group of friends that are accountable, and understand that person who's trying to hold you accountable is not doing it because they know it all. And you're not doing it to them because they know it all. So I would say humility and is a really good drawing a mental blank here. It's a really good attribute of a friend. It's something that I think a close friend and your close group of friends should empower a lot. So.
I will say this, if you want good friends, you have to be a good friend. And that is the bottom line. And you can be good friends to all the people that are around you, and people may not be a good friend back to you, and this is temporary. I mean, you guys have well, I guess you're sixth grade in this room. So you have a few years of school left, but I mean, now is good training for figuring out what kind of friends you want as an adult. Now is good training for figuring out what kind of friends you don't want, what you do and don't like in people, and how to be a good friend to people. Even there's going to be lots of people you're going to work with or be around that you don't necessarily like their personality, but I think high school is a good training ground for what a good friend looks like.
And also, this might be pretty simple, but just pray for your friends, because we pray for our family members, we pray for ourselves, so why wouldn't we pray for our friends as well? It's also important to let our friends know that we're doing that too, and ask if they need anything that they need prayer for. It's important to show the love of Christ through that way as well.
So this is lightning round because these are 3 questions I think can really help out our students right now. So let's start with this one. Let's say our kids right now in this room, they have friends who are making unwise choices. How can they be a good friend to that person?
You can definitely pray for them, talk to them, try to encourage them to do the right thing. I wished I would have had that in different aspects of my friendship growing up with different people.
Be friends. You can still be friends with them in school. You can be friends with them in certain social situations where they're not going to make those dumb decisions. But just don't put yourself in a situation where you're going to make the same unwise choices.
All right. Let's say.
Depending on that relationship too, you can let them know that they are making a bad decision, because if we have a good enough relationship, we're able to let people know, especially if it's a Christian relationship, you can kind of explain to that person what they're doing is wrong and how that's wrong.
All right. Let's say someone feels like they're being picked on by a friend, they're being singled out. How would you tell them how to handle that situation?
Remember the last 2 songs we sang about God's love and how Jesus loves us. Try to focus on that. Try to be overwhelmed with Jesus' love, because then it doesn't matter who else is your friend as long as you have Jesus' love.
And I think if you feel like you're being picked on or singled out too, and I know that everyone wants to be on social media and wants to be a part of everything all the time, but don't be afraid to shut it off and walk away from it for a little while. Make sure you're giving yourselves a break from people, everyone needs a break from people. And if you feel like you're being singled out, you're being left out, the more you spend on social media, the more time you spend on that, the more you're kind of opening your own wounds. Just take some time and be okay. You got to learn to love yourself. You're the one you're stuck with the rest of your life. So, disconnecting a little bit sometimes too is helpful, I think, if you're being picked on or.
Don't be afraid to ask for help from other students, teachers, friends, family members, and ask for guidance. I didn't have anyone to steer me or lead me, and I think I would have been in a different place in my life if I would have had that. And you got a whole bunch of people throughout this church that'd be glad to talk to you and help you out if you need someone to talk to. Don't be afraid to speak up to somebody, and even if you need like a private conversation or something.
All right, so last question. Let's say someone feels like they're being forgotten by past friends. How should they handle that?
You may feel like you're the only one that's dealing with that, and you're not the only one in this room or the only one in your school or the only one in your friend group. I know of groups of friends who all feel like they're being pushed out, and they're all doing it to each other, not even realizing it. So if it's a close friend, they should be able to handle you saying, like, hey, I feel like you're pushing me out, what's going on? And if they don't respond well to that, they're not a very good friend, and you may want to look elsewhere.
Yeah, your friends aren't mind readers, so tell them what's going on. Let people know what issues you have. And Kaylee, you want to say something? Last word?
It's important to remember that God had a purpose for that friendship too, and that He knows our desire for companionship and for friendship, and that He will fulfill that desire again in your heart.
All right, so let's give a hand for our panel one more time. All right, you guys are free to go.